Today, Nintendo's angry in a big way to the point where they're literally filing legal action against the very popular Yuzu emulator that you guys might be familiar with, because it's the emulator that lets you run Switch games on a PC. It's sometimes how you see games leak out early online, as we've talked about at length on this channel, literally a week or 2 weeks ahead of any retail launch of a Nintendo Switch game. If it's something that you're worried about getting spoiled, you pretty much have to go into lockdown mode online to try to avoid leaks and spoilers, because people get these things early via retail copies leaking out. The Switch has been hackable essentially since it's been launched on the marketplace, and people can dump their games, upload them online, and clearly share them out to the masses, where when some people use emulation the right way, and I'm not here to pass judgment whether you do or don't, I don't care what you do with your own personal life, but I will tell you that while emulation is really nice to have from a standpoint of, I own these games, I want to play them in an upscaled resolution, I want to play them in a better resolution, and you still supported the devs, that's a best of both worlds scenario. I enjoy games like Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D, most recently playing through them on the Citra emulator instead of booting them up on my 3DS, because I prefer to play on a bigger display, and you could up-res those graphics and make them look pretty outstanding. However, you might remember that one game we did have to go in lockdown mode for leading into its release was none other than Tears of the Kingdom, and this was the big 2023 game for Nintendo Switch. It sold well over 20 million copies now, massive hit success for Nintendo, the follow-up to the previously most successful selling Zelda game, which is none other than Breath of the Wild. But now we're seeing the legal team from Nintendo come out and talk, and they're mad about this, because over 1 million times before Tears of the Kingdom was launched, it was apparently downloaded online via piracy, and they're now going after the creator of the Yuzu emulator in an official lawsuit. We're going to break all of that down on VGC. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And with that, you can see the following VGC article, which reads, Nintendo says latest Zelda was pirated 1 million times pre-release as it sues Yuzu emulator creator. The company is seeking damages and a shutdown of the Switch emulator. Nintendo of America has filed a lawsuit against Tropic Haze, aka name of your local 420 shop, the creator of popular Switch emulator Yuzu. In a complaint spotted by GameFile reporter Stephen Totillo, the platform holder argues that the defendant and its agents are fully aware of the use of Yuzu by others in performing circumvention and in facilitating piracy at a colossal scale. Yuzu enables users to play pirated Switch games on Windows, Linux, or Android systems, according to Nintendo. Notably, the lawsuit claims that last year's biggest Switch release, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, was pirated over 1 million times in the week and a half before its release in May. With Yuzu in hand, nothing stops a user from obtaining and playing unlawful copies of virtually any game made for the Nintendo Switch without paying a dime to Nintendo or any of the hundreds of other game developers and publishers making and selling games for the Nintendo Switch, the company says. In effect, Yuzu turns general computing devices into tools for massive intellectual property infringement of Nintendo and other copyrighted works. Nintendo is seeking damages for alleged violations and a shutdown of the emulator. I would also like to point out a post from Oatmeal Dome, which does outline one more specific thing that Nintendo might be targeting here, because we're going to have a broader conversation on how emulation itself is not inherently illegal, but with this Yuzu specific situation, you can see Oatmeal Dome's post, which reads, Nintendo is suing the developers of Switch emulator Yuzu. They allege that the Yuzu developers willingly facilitate and profit on piracy of Switch games via Patreon, specifically pointing to Yuzu being used to play leaked copies of Tears of the Kingdom before its release date. So this is really going to be a wait and see what happens type of situation, because first of all, the legal system moves extremely slowly. We're going to have to see if this goes to trial and what ultimately comes of it, but this has been one of those touchy issues where, even though companies are clearly not a fan of emulators, like if it was up to Nintendo, Dolphin emulator for the GameCube and Wii games would not be a thing. They definitely don't want you to have easy access to play their current games or their old retro games, because look at Nintendo Switch Online. They're selling us emulators and the ability to play their classic catalog of games as a monthly reoccurring source of revenue for their company. So clearly they don't want you to have the easy access to do that, and especially when you're looking at a game like Tears of the Kingdom that's selling at a $70 price tag for anybody walking in and purchasing one as a retail copy. Well, if some people choose to pirate that, that is all money out of Nintendo's pocket, market, and the interesting case they might be able to make with Yuzu. And I haven't deep dove this myself, but Oatmeal Dome pointing out that there's some kind of Patreon support going on with the developers, and I think there was a post online I scrolled across that essentially said the Patreon memberships skyrocketed up after the release of Tears of the Kingdom, kind of like the fan base that chose to download the game that way, supporting the ease of access to do that because of the Yuzu emulator, and in turn they are financially benefiting off of Nintendo's intellectual property, which might be the one kind of loophole that would give Nintendo some kind of grounds to stand on here in terms of winning the case. In terms of just taking down the emulator altogether, that's going to be a very interesting one, because this is a can of worms, as I mentioned, companies don't really want to go down. It is a very costly and lengthy battle to prove that anyone's emulator out there is truly infringing on or doing something illegal with your content, because you do have to source those ROMs yourself. Now, there's some gray area with the kind of security key that has to be checked in order for your Nintendo Switch games to play. I haven't set up Yuzu myself, so I don't know the entire process, but I've watched a video here or there, and I know there was some claims about Steam recently with Dolphin Emulator and that being promoted as part of Steam Deck and being able to run on Steam Deck, and Nintendo actually issued a DMCA takedown for Dolphin to be removed from the Steam store, or rather Steam asked Nintendo first if they were okay with it. They said no, and they in turn took that all down, and they didn't. Now we don't have a version of Dolphin planned to come to Steam Deck because of red tape like this. The companies don't want to get in the weeds and actually go to a legal battle with Nintendo or any other company here, and it seems like that million-plus copies of Tears of the Kingdom just being out there ahead of time before the game even launched is maybe the straw that broke the camel's back with this, and they're probably going to put a good amount of money into trying to win the case, but whether or not they come out with any kind of substantial ruling will remain to be seen. And then that's also really an interesting conversation for the future of emulation in general, because if Nintendo somehow wins this case, takes down the creator, gets back whatever funds they get from them, maybe another Gary Bowser situation where they're paying Nintendo potentially for the rest of their lives. Yes, that is a real thing that's happened before in court rulings, and it could happen here. What does that mean for other companies that want to go after emulation projects? Does that kind of open the floodgates where these companies are going to come after various emulators that are out there? I'm in no way, shape, or form claiming to be a legal expert, and I don't fully understand the implications of how a company would win or not win that battle in a courtroom, but I do think that when there's financial gain involved, like there could be with this particular Yuzu creator, Nintendo may indeed win the battle in terms of getting an example made out of this person, and maybe you just have a situation where these emulators trying to distinguish that they won't be making any profit off of the emulator at all, and maybe that's kind of the direction we see things go, because I don't see Nintendo making it straight up illegal for Yuzu to exist. Maybe in its current form, there might be a reformed emulator released. I think there's actually one other one out there that can play Switch games, but the broader concern here is if Nintendo goes and makes an example out of the Yuzu creator personally, and then also wins on any kind of front in terms of arguing that emulation of its content is somehow illegal, well, then that's opening up an entirely different conversation, and I don't see it getting to that point, but we will ultimately have to wait and see with it. And as somebody who's a big fan of game preservation and just being able to enjoy the games that you purchased or that you can't purchase anymore, so there's no monetary exchange going to the developers of the games or the companies that published it, but at that point in time, it's like, let us play the games that were previously created and designed to be enjoyed by players, and don't make a big deal about it if you're not giving us another viable way to play it. That said, you should always be emulating copies of games that you own in a perfect world. Obviously, not everybody does that, but I'm still very much all for the existence of a Switch emulator, especially in a world where we are talking about one day. You got to remember the Wii U and 3DS eShop, they're gone. You can't buy games from those anymore. It doesn't matter if you want to give Nintendo hundreds of dollars into a classic eShop only digital release game catalog from those systems, they don't exist anymore. And one day that will be the case with the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch eShop servers that we love, that we are purchasing our current games that we enjoy in today, will one day no longer exist. And if there are classic hidden gem games that you're going through videos and watching in the distant future, you got to pick up these 10 hidden gems as part of the Nintendo Switch eShop, and they don't exist anymore, and you can't buy them because they haven't been re-released or carried forward to the next next-gen console, at that point, emulation absolutely needs to and should remain around for game preservation as a whole. And I certainly hope that we don't see anything negative happen here with this particular lawsuit to take that away. But that's where I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, because I know emulation's a controversial and divisive topic online. How do you feel about it? Are you kind of like me and you're somebody who does enjoy booting up a visually enhanced version of a game that you own from time to time? Or maybe you're more of a TV console gamer and you want to have a bigger screen experience, but you like emulating handheld only games and enjoying them that way. And what do you think is going to ultimately come from this Yuzu emulator case with this particular creator and the potential for Patreon support and new memberships going up during the release of Tears of the Kingdom? Do you think Nintendo has a case here and they may indeed take down Yuzu ultimately, or at least the creator? Or do you think this is one of those things that is getting some attention right now but may ultimately blow over the course of time? So thanks for watching the video today. Make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe on your way out, and I will see you guys in the next video.